You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio, with your hosts Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom.
I tell you what, it is hitting that time of year in Minnesota where it is really difficult to be productive at this kind of afternoon time of day. It's a struggle for me, I'll be honest.
The weather's nice and the birds are singing.
Yeah, we don't get it for long, so that urge to take advantage of it when you can is just so high. But I digress. I've got a topic we've touched on several times before, but I think we should do a little bit of a deeper dive into this one. So the thought here is for us to do a list of our top tips for hosting a productive meeting. So specifically, when you're the host and you have control over a lot of the things that are going to be set up, the who, the what, the where, the why, those types of things, how can you make sure to guide it in as to be as productive of a meeting as you can?
Tip number one, don't have meetings.
That's absolutely spot on, man. Love it.
Okay.
So,
all right, so you want to do your top three, and then I take a stab with my top three?
Yeah, sounds good. So for number 3 for me, I'll go 3-1. So number 3 is make the agenda short and clear. So if you can't summarize it with some specific short statements, think bullet points. And being very clear if there are decisions to be made, if there is brainstorming that's going to happen, be very clear about what the context of those things are in the meeting, or in the agenda before the meeting. That way, as people are getting ready for that meeting or looking out at their day, or for most meetings, checking in on it in the 2 minutes before the meeting actually starts, it's really clear they can get aligned on where they're going, what they're doing. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's too often times an agenda has just too much stuff in it, and you just can't. It's you may as well not have an agenda.
Yep. Absolutely. So the number 2 for me is, as you're thinking through the who is going to be in the meeting, the actual attendees that are going to be there, there's so often this problem of kind of a bloated meeting with too many people in it. It's not clear as to, why is it that I'm in this meeting? So tip number 2 is to be very clear and make sure that each person who you've invited to the meeting knows, why me? Why am I here? What value do you think I might bring to this meeting?
Right. Do you think sometimes people, especially when I'm working with a client, I think sometimes they over-invite people either as sometimes it's a power thing where we want to have more people, but sometimes it's, I don't really know who can make a decision on this, so I'm going to invite everybody and their brother to this meeting. Yeah,
happens all the time. And, in those types of situations, maybe you've reached out to the wrong person, or sometimes you're trying to make do with someone who is a delegate that's not an appropriate delegate, and trying to work through those kind of issues to make sure the right people are at the table who can actually get stuff done. That's really what you want to be driving toward for a productive meeting.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So then my top tip for this one is to, before you even go into the meeting, think about what the progression of that meeting is going to look like. Look back through the kind of clear agenda that you have there and start writing that envisioned future of what is this meeting actually going to look like. And what you're actually writing is your recap email that you're going to send out to everyone. Thanks for participating. Here's what we talked about. Here was the discussion. Here are the decisions that we made. So write that kind of vision of what the meeting is going to look like, so then you can use that to be able to take notes in context while you're going through that meeting. You can capture what those key decisions are. You've already got the space for it, and it'll be, maybe not perfectly formatted. You'll have some cleaning up to do, but you can make sure a couple of things. One is that you do actually hit the topics that you meant to. to, if you miss some of those topics, you can call out that we didn't make it to these, but we need to hit them in another meeting. And then lastly, you've got those key decisions, next steps that you've been capturing along the way. It reduces that amount of post-meeting work that you have to do, and it also helps keep the meeting on track while you go through it. So that's been a huge one for me.
Right. Yeah, I like that idea. Definitely. And I haven't actually used it. I'm going to start using that one. That's a great idea. That way and that could start from the agenda. You could have the bullet points from the agenda be the starting point of that, and summarize there. And that's one of those things that a lot of times the meeting minutes or the post meeting email, it's just something you got to do, and it becomes a drag, or it becomes this big thing that you spend half an hour afterwards. I can see where putting that together beforehand is going to help you be much more efficient at that, and it's much less of a big, hairy thing you got to do after the meeting gets done. Yeah,
that's exactly what it's born from as well, is that kind of post-meeting blues when it's like, I know I have to recap the meeting, but I'm looking through the notes that I'd taken and trying to turn that into something that's a concise summary can be really, really difficult for that. So by having, what would the ideal meeting flow be? What do I think we might, get into some of the weeds on in these different topics? I can fill in a couple of specific details from the meeting, but it's also that additional incentive for me to keep the meeting on track, because then afterward I don't have to go change all this stuff that I'd put together before the meeting. And sometimes they get off track and I'll need to go and make some updates to it, and that's okay. I mean, that is reality, but I've found that as I do this more and more, I'm able to keep them much more concise.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So those are my three. I'm curious. Do you have a top three that you think you could go through? Putting you on the spot, Joel.
I could give you a top 25, but let's look at the three. Okay. And understanding the context for people that are listening that may not know what my job is, I'm a consulting principal focused on CRM. And so what that means, I've got certain types of meetings that I do a lot. I'll be meeting with clients to either do a discovery around an opportunity or a need for customer relationship management software. I'll be presenting something like here's our findings, here's a roadmap, here's a statement of work, where and then once we're in a project, various meetings, status meetings, executive status meetings, project closeout meetings, those types of things. And so, one of the things that's big for me is stick to the time. And that means, if it's kind of like time in a meeting for certain people, it just keeps going and it will fill any time you have. And so you have to, make sure that you're respectful of your time as well as your client's time. Their time is important. There's nothing that turns people off more than somebody who just doesn't respect time, either shows up late or is in meetings and goes over, or you're over for one meeting so you're late to the other one, or you forgot you scheduled something so you got to cut off early and I got a hard stop halfway through, I got to run somewhere else. So stick to the time. That means, especially for web meetings, I do a lot of web meetings in all the different technologies like Skype or WebEx or GoToMeeting. There's always some kind of delay between when you click the link and you actually get in the meeting. And so that means you got to be proactive to click that link sometimes 5 minutes before the meeting, because some of this WebEx stuff, I don't know who came up with the 13-digit code you got to type in to get on the meeting, but it's going to take a while. So that's my number one, and be rigid about the time. Now, if you're at the end of the time and the conversation's really good and you have consensus, you want to go longer, I'm not opposed to that. But at least have somebody who says, we got 5 minutes left, and it means during the meeting, keeping an eye on the time, or having somebody be the timekeeper who's keeping us on track. And if we're talking about three things and one was 20 minutes, one was 20 minutes, and one was 30 minutes, if we're at minute 45 and we're still on topic one, we're not gonna make it.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm in the consulting space as well, and one of the challenges that we have is when things go over, we start looking at were those hours in the budget in the first place, and having to go back and have those conversations. And most of the time, it's clients coming up with more and more things along the way that are driving those to go over. Perhaps it's just a complete sidebar, but the more you can kind of keep that rigor, that facilitation, I'm with you 100% there, man. That's a great one. Right.
Number 2 is pre-gaming. And what I mean by pre-gaming is when you have a meeting, especially if you are coming back with a recommendation for somebody, or you've gone through a project and now you're giving a roadmap presentation or some kind of presentation, or this could be a demo as well, that you're setting up for that initial, that initial, you got what they want to do. Now you're going to show them what you're going to show them. Being able to pregame it, say you've got somebody on the other side that is on your, that you're friends with, or they're your sponsor or whatever. Somebody, not the whole group, but somebody, a smaller subset, 1 or 2 people that you can do a quick pregame with and say, okay, here's what we're going to go over. What do you think? You can find out, are we using the right terminology? Are we showing them stuff that's really going to be in line with what they're looking for? Are we wasting their time with anything here? Do we have 10 slides talking about how great we are, and then 4 about what they really want to know? Should these be in different orders? Is the guy who is in charge of marketing only going to be there for the first 10 minutes? Those kind of things. You'll save yourself a ton of time. I'll give you an example. I did a call today that was a 90-minute call, and it was kind of a discovery call, and we had, I wanted to make sure that we were ready to go, so I sent them, 5 or 6 fairly simple initial questions of, I know we're going to have to talk about these things. If you can give us this information, we'll hit the ground running. And we cut that 90-minute call down to about 70 minutes. So we saved 20 minutes by doing that, and we're better prepared. And that can also be, I mentioned like the WebEx or Skype for Business or GoToMeeting or Join Me. None of those technologies work for everybody. There's always firewalls out there. And so if you're doing a web conference where you're going to show a screen, during the pregame, do a tech check. Make sure, start a quick meeting. Can you join this? Can you see my screen? Great. Because I don't know how many WebExes or link meetings or GoToMeetings you waste 20 minutes with. I can't see the screen. You can see it now. Well, go here. Okay, let's jump over to Join Me now. Does this work? Any of that stuff, especially if it's, now maybe if it's a casual, just checking in meeting or whatever, you're not going to do that. But the big meetings, the meetings that are important, business meetings, those types of things. But that would apply even for if you're meeting with your, PTA or something, or you have a non-corporate event that you're getting together, pre-gaming it with people on the committee or whatever, just to make sure you'll do a better job. It'll be a better meeting for everybody. You'll be prepared for it. Do your homework.
Yep, absolutely. I've run into probably the biggest problems with a tool called Blue Jeans for audio and video sharing on web calls. Boy, that one, just every time I've had to use it with a client, that seems to be the biggest troublemaker. More so than
I would expect a tool with the name of Blue Jeans to be 100% work every time. That's surprising. All right, so I gave my 2. The third one, and this is one I pull out. I don't use this for every meeting, but we've all been on meetings where we have the multitasker, the guy or woman who we know isn't really fully engaged in the meeting. I may or may not have been guilty of that, being that person at some time in the past, but it's really irritating to everybody else in the meeting for that person to be, every time their name is mentioned, say, can you repeat yourself? I was muted. The I was muted guy who wasn't really muted. He or she is just pretending to be muted so they can, do whatever it is they're doing. Play Angry Birds or whatever.
That never happens. What are you talking about?
And so, as the consulting principal in a project team, I will occasionally pull out the webcam card. And I will say, okay, we need to turn on our webcams. Now, don't love to use my webcam, but I found that all these technologies like Skype, GoToMeeting have support for webcams, but nobody seems to want to use it. But if you're leading the meeting, you can't necessarily do it if you're not the leader of the meeting. But if you're the leader of the meeting and you feel like things are dragging out or people aren't paying attention, turn on the webcams.
Yeah,
it'll go 100% faster.
Interesting idea.
And you'll have it. So again, I wouldn't do that. That's not my first choice, but if I have to, I'll pull out the webcam card.
And I suppose you have to make sure you have a webcam appropriate shirt on when you're doing that,
or that you're wearing pants.
You must have a nice wide angle webcam then.
Exactly. It's like, and if you ever seen like the news bloopers where the guy is wearing the nice suit and he stands up and he's got shorts on or something. Yeah, you don't want that to happen. So, what is not productive this week?
Well, Joel, I tell you what, this one, I have had a project that I've been working on. This is a little bit of a confessional here. I've had a project I've been working on in my spare time for, the last 3 or so months. I'm an amateur tabletop board game designer, away from work.
And tabletop game podcast host, too.
That is true. So for just a way to flex my mental muscles in a different way, I've been developing, and I just released my very next tabletop board game called Whistleblower, which is the game of strategy, secrets, and scandal that I just made available through a print-on-demand board game service, which I have now entered into a contest as well to see kind of how that goes for me. So it's certainly a first for me. I'm pretty excited about that contest piece of it. I have released a couple of other tabletop games before, but this is the first time I'm really competing. And I tell you what, man, this has been definitely a not very productive use of my time. I mean, there's certainly a product at the end of it, but this has been much more of a time investment than I expected it to be, getting it to that kind of contest-ready level.
So what is the contest? Is it a board game competition for best game?
So it is, the name of this contest is called the Big Box Challenge, and it's to design a new game that would have just a bunch of components in it. So whether those are cards, cardboard punch-outs, dice, boards, I've got a screen in there, a score sheet that you're keeping track of things on, just a board game with a lot of stuff in it that's unique and created after the starting time for this contest, which was earlier this year. And there's a bunch of rules for how long the game has to last, and what the cost of the game has to be, and so forth and so forth. So yeah, it's been a fun one.
But it was one of those things that the level of work required versus what you thought it was originally was quite a bit more.
Well, I tell you what. So I took a minimum viable product approach to being able to get something that was play testable out, and that part fell within what I expected it to be able to get to that point. Where I really kind of ran into things was that contest side of it, where I might have said along the way that, this or that component was good enough, or the rules look good enough, or I don't necessarily need that video to be able to go live with the published game. But when there's a contest that's sitting behind that, it was that added incentive to go one step beyond in some of those different areas, because I like to win.
Well, liking to win is good for game competitions.
That's right.
Is this game available to buy now?
Absolutely. This game is available to buy. I'm sure we can put a link in the show notes, but it is on a site called The Game Crafter, and you can just search for Whistleblower. 2 words, whistle space blower.
When is the contest judging, and when will you find out how you did?
Yeah, so the judging is taking place in the month of June. It starts with a community judging round. It'll be down-selected to semifinals, and then after that, finals. The semifinals and finals don't have defined time periods, but come 4th of July time, maybe into mid-July, we should have an update.
It's been good to catch up with you again, and thank you for your meeting tips. I'm going to start doing the meeting notes before the meeting. I like that idea.
All right, I want to know how it works.
This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. You can follow Matthew C. Anderson on his blog, connectingthedata.com, where you can download his ebook about 8 essential Skype for business hacks. You can also follow him on Twitter at MC Anderson. Joel Lindstrom is on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. Do you have any feedback for us or questions about how to be more productive? Send an email to mail@prodcast.show or leave a comment on the CRM Audio Facebook page. You can subscribe to ProdCast at prodcast.show, iTunes, or subscribe to the CRM Audio feed to get this podcast and other series from CRM Audio. This is Joel Lindstrom. Until next time, remember to stay productive.